I welcome you to the 17th edition of Lumen International Scientific Conference, Rethinking Social Action Core Values in Practice. Today we will develop an event that has been organized by Lumen Conference Center from Iași, Romania, Lumen Research Center in Social and Humanistic Sciences, Lumen Publishing Iași, Romania, Lumen Media Ltd, London, United Kingdom, Lumen Consultancy and Training Center from Iași, Romania, and Lumen Congress RLA Iași, Romania. As co-organizers, we have Petre Andrei University from Iași, Romania. We give also special thanks to our partners, international partners from State University of Physical Education and Sports of the Republic of Moldova, Near East University Institute of Graduate Studies from Nicosia, Cyprus, Faculty of Philosophy, University of Nice from Serbia, the Department of Economics, Epoca University Tirana, Albania, Danubius University from Galați, Romania, Valahia University from Târgoviște, Romania, University of Kyrenia, Cyprus, and also University of Vlor, Ismail Kemali, Albania. I will continue by giving a short introduction to our close friend and director of this event, Professor PhD Antonio Sandu, which is representing this event as Professor PhD from Stefan Mare University of Suceava, but also as Director of Lumen Research Center in Social and Humanistic Sciences and Director of this international conference. I will give some small insights about his interests in research, which include ethics, bioethics, social work, and social philosophy. His original contribution start from the social construction of reality and social constructionism, as seen from a semiological perspective. I will give him this speech, but before that, I would like to introduce also the first plenary speaker of this session, in the person of Professor PhD Jean-Pierre Cléro from University of Rouen, France. I will go further to introduce him after the director of Lumen International Conference will give us some insights of this event. Professor Antonio Sandu, are you here with us? Do you hear us?
Yes, hello, and welcome to our conference. It's a pleasure, an honor for us to host again a conference on Lumen behalf, on Lumen Research Center and Lumen Conference Center behalf. It's a tradition for us to organize this conference and to let the researchers to be together and speak about ethics and what are the newest problems and ideas in social sciences and humanities, and correlating them to ethics. Nowadays, the problems are very complex in the world. We just had a public health crisis since 2020, and now we have a crisis, a war crisis in nearby in Ukraine. So we live in very difficult times. So researchers in social and humanistic fields are welcome to speak about how to overcome the crisis and how to make our world a safety world. So most of the topics are correlated to the topics I saw in the program. That are many researchers that do presents a paper on COVID-19 crisis or on the war crisis. So we're glad to hear them and we hope that contribution will be made available, because they will be online on YouTube and on Facebook, and will be published in our journals, covered in databases, in international databases, even on Web of Science, EBSCO, and CEOL, and so on. And maybe this paper will be discovered by not only by other researchers, but to the people that are involved in the decision process and decision making. So maybe some ideas will be important for the next period. It's just wishful thinking, but hope to be important in the changing period that we are living on. I will ask Anna, before starting the conference, to say some words about the diversity of the participants, from how many countries, how many universities, if you have a few ideas about this conference, because it's important that we are gathering not only from Romania, but from many other countries, and Anna Frunze will let us know how many participants are in this conference and from how many countries. Anna?
Thank you, Antonio Sandu, for your idea. Actually, it's a challenge because I have no such graphics for the moment, but I will inform you about, let's say, a short overview of what this conference means. We had a success in gathering researchers from scientific community from more than 15 countries all over the world, and this conference was point of interest for more than 170 participants, both with oral and poster presentation, but also there will be events that are dedicated to book releases or workshops, scientific workshops dedicated to public health ethics, so dedicate also workshops dedicated to educational studies, educational sciences. And in association with this scientific event, you will be glad to participate to a cultural event that is also organized by Lumen Group. And you will, I'm sure that you will be pleased to find new projects that we develop. Also, you should know that during this event, during the organizing process of this conference, there were many researchers that intended to participate in online format only. We actually wanted for this conference to be an on-site and online event, but as you already see, we are into an online event due to the, let's say, fear that we are still in a pandemic time. But even so, we are here. We gather, as I already told you, more than 170 participants. We are proud of it because we are succeeding to develop events, scientific events, even in crisis times. And today we will go further in continuing this plenary session by introducing you the first plenary speaker of this day, in the person of Professor PhD Jean-Pierre Cléro from University of Rouen, France. He will give us a speech on mathematics and language. But before I will give him the invitation to speak, I will tell you about something about his background. He's teaching in the Department of Philosophy, being specialized in Anglo-Saxon philosophy. His philosophical concerns go beyond the frame of analytical philosophy. He has previously taught in Flaubert and Joan d'Arc High School from Rouen. Then in 1994, he has become associate professor at the University of Haute-Normandy. He obtains his habilitation at the University of Paris, ex-Nanterre, on January 24, 1996. In the same year, he was made professor at the University of Haute-Normandy. In 2001, he advances to the status of class 1 professor, in 2010 achieving the status of professor of exceptional class. Currently, he is director of Bentham Center from the Institute of Political Sciences in Paris, being member of the International Academy of History of Sciences from Bruxelles. Professor Jean-Pierre Cléro, welcome and thank you for being here today with us. You are invited to give your plenary speech. Do you hear us?
Yes. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Antonio. Hello to you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and dear friends, I thank the organizers of this Congress for inviting me, and I wish a full success of the 17th conference of Lumen. As many communication, as many participations deal with pedagogical issues, I thought that it could be interesting to investigate about the diversity of languages that we use in order to expose mathematics and to teach them and also to invent them. In the examples of the article that accompanies this intervention, I principally deal with classical mathematics from the 18th century to the beginning of the 19th century, because they were the ones, Bentham, the father of the English utilitarianism, I knew. Indeed, I would like to show, relying on this author, the importance of the diversity of the discourses in mathematics as in any other branch of knowledge. So the title of my talk is Mathematics, a Knot of Languages, Variations on a Theme by Bentham. It is known that Bentham defined fiction as a language being of which the object was attributed existence by the author or the user of it. Most of the time, fiction is obtained by nouning a process. It is by attributing a name to a process, which is presented in spite of its fluctuation as a thing and as objective. So it is supposed that to make the fiction work, it is necessary that some beings or acts are not considered fictitious, but rather are real, and that the fictions are as if they were as superstructures built upon a real base or on a base pretended to be real. The strata, which are built up in each superstructure, gradually recede from the basement, held as if it were in contact of things. It is also known that in each area inspected, law, ethics, religions, sciences, fictional functioning are observed. Mathematics are no exception. In Chrestomathia, that is a book that investigates what would be useful to be learned and taught to the members of a modern society, for itself and for each of them, we are witnessing, particularly in the appendix number 8, an analysis of this discipline from this point of view. How to do in order to teach the very diverse intelligences that make up a society, which cannot be isolated from the other societies, how to teach disciplines that suit a modern society at the level that suits each individual. So mathematics is scrutinized from usefulness in very different and intermingled senses. What is useful to be learned in a society is not necessarily the same thing for each other. And yet, in order to say that learning is more useful than another, it is necessary that these utilities be commensurable. The appendix number 8 views this commensurability, neither in the community of some character of human nature, nor in different psychological characters that end up combining with each other, but it views it in the same belonging to language. Like law, ethics, religion, and the other disciplines, mathematics offers a wide variety of uses included inside itself: arithmetic, algebra, geometry, topology, the calculation of probabilities, whatever subjective probabilities or objective probabilities, require very different bundles of language uses, even if they can be considered as the arborescence of the same tree or of the same grove. Whatever society of which we are citizens, men share mathematics as they share language, considered in its various tongues and in its various uses within each of them. Properly speaking, mathematics has no self-existing objects that would allow everyone access, however diverse, like perception seems to relate to specific objects, if the object of perception exists in themselves in the way of given things without language. Its objects are not distinct and independent from what may be laid by the speech acts like definitions, axioms, reasonings, and demonstrations. Therefore, the fictitious nature of these objects appear from the outset, even if we deal with objects that seem to have a sort of substantiality or particularly tough stability by themselves, like numbers, points, lines, areas, volumes, and the acts that allow to relate to those objects. Everybody knows that such objects do not exist like minute color spots, like edges of objects, or like traces that would be continuous as they seem to be. Therefore, they can be taken as fictions. But among those fictions, some are in a way more so than others. We will particularly focus on the latter that are fictions more than others. It is to this latter, more than to the others, that we are particularly interested in the article for Lumen. It is obviously not a question of listing them all. The matter will be to distinguish and to classify them, that is to say, to group them into sections. A fraction or an infinitesimal are not fictions as a transcendent number, that is, however, divisible to infinity. A fraction of certainty is not calculated as a quantity that may be added and will then make disappear in order to obtain a quadrature, a rectification, or center of gravity. However, the idea that appeared as essential in appendix number 8 of Questomatia on the question of fictions is less that of the classification than that of the interleaving of the sort of discourses that mathematics bring into play in order to pretend in some way to have an object. And especially in spite of the fallacious word of superstructure taken over from from Ferguson, from the essay on the history of civil society of Ferguson, the way in which the diverse discourses are linked together, such as any of them, whatever it may be symbolic, and it may be so in several modes or more vulgar and of vernacular use, whatever it may be verbal or more intuitive, be alternately fundamental in the function of a base or supported by that base. This way, the languages are linked might be the most important fiction introduced in the field of mathematics by Questomatia, so that it can disseminate in other areas through this structure, which allows free uses of language, free languages, perhaps algebraic or symbolic language, geometrical language, more figurative or intuitive, and the vernacular, so the usual language, to coexist without one definitely dominating the other, but in such a way that we have to try the whole set of languages as you try a set of keys. The languages in mathematics might be linked like Borromean rings, so they could not change any single one, and specifically break one, without changing the other, and particularly without freeing them from each other. Of course, this is not a question to engage in a few minutes in overly detailed analysis, of which some of them are in the text that I gave entrusted to the editor. I first deliver a result, but I propose to you to follow a more detailed talk about what becomes of the vernacular in a set of languages that are symbolic, as in algebra, or more figurative or intuitive as in geometry. The affirmation, the result, is this one. When we have understood that no language stands by itself, and that it must rely on another or others to understand itself, that each one can be considered as a, let's say, intermediary of another indefinitely, that each has its own images translatable in others, however, never completely, never perfectly, but living void or dreaming of overlays. We do not want to take one for the foundation of all the others. Or if we prefer, we can at leisure take one alternately and in different circumstances for diverse needs as the foundation of all the others, following in the structure of the binding of the Borromean rings, of which such or such may be the foundation of any other ring, but also at the same time be founded by any other. The intuitive seeps between the symbolic and the vernacular. The symbolic gives to conceive to the vernacular. The vernacular understands the symbolic, the game of new things, and the intuitive, the games of mind forces or mental forces. Or rather, the symbolic and the intuitive are understood by the vernacular. There are relations of reciprocal seeping between terms that are not confused, but that are strongly individualized. A whole book would be necessary to make sure how the three linguistic forms are associated, starting with each one taken as base of the two others. Let's only take a few steps in that direction by reflecting on a singularly litigious case, the one of the status of the vernacular. The vernacular is well known to be closer to intuition than the symbolic language. And we would say of it that it provides ground for the other languages. But this discourse proves inaccurate when it is considered more closely. This discourse is not relevant when we observe the relationship between algebra and the vernacular. If we immediately understand that the terms are not handled in the same way in the parentheses or outside of them, it is certainly not by the vernacular that we know it. It took an insight that concerns the symbolic itself. The vernacular simply came to reinforce and confirm the insight. It is through the intuition of symbolic that we can write in the terms of the vernacular an algebraic equation, even very simple, but already too complicated for it. Not the other way around. But one will object that the case of algebra is particular and cannot be valid for all the forms of the symbolic discourses. In the phenomenology of perception, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, French philosopher, thought he could show that the figures drawn by the geometer implied as much a relation to the living body as a relation to concepts. That we do not draw on the sheet the outline of the triangle supposed to help us solve the problem without this figure being arranged in a privileged way in relation to my body and to the world around myself. That, at least, one of its sides should be approximatively parallel to the ground, this parallelism and this ground being perfectly imaginary, though quite relative to the situation of my body. Then the geometrical figures of geometry follow a double logic. One of the concepts involved in the problem to be solved, the other less visible, more implicit, although it was necessary to acquire that implicit, that is one of the presentation of the figures matching with the insertion of my body in the world. So a student that would draw, put a right angle triangle without one of its side, preferably the hypotenuse, be substantially parallel to the ground, passes for a poorly educated boy, perhaps mentally unbalanced, in any case for ill-intentioned with regard to discipline. That even though at this very moment the solving of the problem of the square of the hypotenuse would not suffer from another presentation than the statutory presentation of the right angle triangle, because the square built upon the side by the Euclidean solution seems to twirl around the figures. This statutory presentation linked to the interference of the body in geometry is not without a convention that risk intimating misconceptions, occasioning misconceptions.
Professor Cléro, just a second. I just want to tell you that there are 5 minutes more, almost.
The time is over?
Yeah. There are 5 minutes more.
Oh. Well, in the last part of my exposition, I wanted to make a critique of Merleau-Ponty, and I wanted to say that it is very important that my discourse is not against intuition. Intuition is very necessary in mathematics, and the thing that is very strange is that Bentham, who is utilitarian author, thought that, if I give the advice to learn how to solve problems by intuition without first writing or without first figuring and drawing figures. He thinks it was very necessary to have an intuitive representation of the problems first. And I think it is very necessary, not only in mathematics, but in the other domains, in the other fields of politics, religion, etc., to have an intuition of the problem, which is very precise, but not necessarily written, not necessarily figured, not necessarily determinate with other things, as in the symbolic language. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for considering the time that we scheduled for this this presentation. Thank you again for replying to our invitation of giving your speech on mathematics and language. And now, for those who are interested in bringing commentaries or asking questions on the professor's speech, you are kindly invited to announce your commentaries or to ask your questions now live. thank you again, Professor Jean-Pierre Cléro, for presenting your paper today. If there will be no additional comments to this presentation, Professor Cléro, would you like to bring a final word related to your presence to our conference, related to your paper, some final thoughts?
You're waiting for questions? No?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We are waiting for questions, but in the time we are waiting, we hope that you will be able to give us some insights on this event. And if there will be no questions, we will end the session listening to you and your final remarks.
Yes. My problem was to explain how in what seems to be a single determinate language in mathematics, there are really many languages that are intermingled, and it is necessary to have many approaches to get a result in mathematics. Sometimes we do not we are not conscious of this plurality. In particular, when we are drawing figures, we don't know how we are drawing a figure relatively to the world that is around us and relatively to our body. We forget this aspect, and we don't know how much is weighing on our fashion of doing mathematics. The same with symbolic and imaginary. When it is necessary to when we solve a problem, not only to have a symbolic language, but also imaginary. It is very rare. It is very rare that the symbolic can go by itself. We need to have many other languages. So it is the reason why I speak of not of languages. And the point that seems to me important is that there is not a sort of pyramid of languages. They are not as a pile. They are not compiled. They are not added the one to the other. They are associated as Borromean rings. That is, when you touch, when you change a ring, you change all the other. When we cut a ring, you free all the rings. And no one is more fundamental than the other. You have a sort of intuition of these languages in mathematics, as in religion, as in law, etc. It was my purpose to show this point in the article, and now, but I have not. I had not all the time for.
Thank you so much for your speech and for your final remarks.